and welcome to St. Andrew. It is my privilege to welcome you here today from the St. Andrew Sanctuary. I am grateful, as always, to share this sacred online space with you, where we are all invited, included, and valued as vital and beloved members of our broader worshiping community. St. Andrew is proud to be an open, affirming, inclusive congregation that welcomes all people into the full life and communion of our church. This includes saints and sinners, believers and skeptics, the lost and the found, the wanderers and the wanderers, families of all shapes and sizes, and people from every point along life's journey. No matter who you are or where you've been, no matter what you believe or even if you believe anything at all, you are welcome here and you belong here. If you have any questions about our church, prayer requests for our care team, or if you would like to get in touch with a member of our pastoral team or staff, please email info@gostandrew.com. If you would like to explore deeper engagement with the St. Andrew community through our mini classes, group life gatherings, and service opportunities, you can email us directly at connect@gostandrew.com. We'd love to hear from you. Lastly, to contribute a financial gift to the work and ministry of St. Andrew, you can always visit gostandrew.com/give or text St. Andrew to 28950. And now, let's listen together to this week's scripture and sermon.
Exodus chapter 17. From the wilderness of Sin, the whole congregation of the Israelites journeyed by stages, as the Lord commanded. They camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink. The people quarreled with Moses and said, "Give us water to drink." Moses said to them, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you test the Lord?" But the people thirsted there for water, and the people complained against Moses and said, "Why did you bring us out of Egypt to kill us and our children and livestock with thirst?" So Moses cried out to the Lord, "What shall I do with these people? They are almost ready to stone me." The Lord said to Moses, "Go on ahead of the people and take some of the elders of Israel with you. Take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile, and go. I will be standing in front of you on the rock of Horeb. Strike the rock and water will come out of it, so that the people may drink." Moses did so. In the sight of the elders of Israel, he called the place Massah and Meribah, because the Israelites quarreled and tested the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?"
With the Academy Awards show airing tonight, I've been thinking about what makes for a truly great movie. Each year, the Academy awards about 34 Oscars to creatives in the film industry: actors, directors, cinematographers, editors, musicians, makeup artists, animators. If you watch tonight's show, you'll sit through countless speeches from people you've never heard of, rambling on and on about obscure movies you've never heard about, just to get to that highly anticipated moment about 8 or 9 hours later, when at last the most celebrated award of the evening is finally handed out. Best Picture. That one great movie you've probably never even seen. But what makes that movie so great? You can say maybe it's the acting, the soundtrack, the directing, visual effects, lighting, but doesn't it really start with actually having a great story? There are countless storyline motifs that make for great movies, but one of the most common and resonant cinematic themes is the one about the proverbial road trip. Think Little Miss Sunshine, Green Book, Thelma and Louise, even Dumb and Dumber. They're all road trip stories. The road trip motif is about characters trying to get from one place to another, who along the way experience unfamiliar places, encounter new people, and must overcome dangers and roadblocks or detours until finally arriving somewhere, having learned something about themselves that they didn't know before. The road trip is the oldest story in the book. In fact, it made Homer a best-selling author nearly 3,000 years ago with his Iliad and the Odyssey. We love road trip stories because we're all trying to get from one place to another, from here to there, from there to here, and we know what it feels like to be far from there, to long for home, to drift at sea, to journey across that seemingly barren space between what once was and what's yet to be. Every November, I watch Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, a great road trip story. Poor Neil, trapped with this insufferable stranger, Del Griffith, the shower curtain ring guy, navigating flight cancellations, train breakdowns, car fires, wrong turns, snowstorms, petty burglary. He's forced to share a bed with chatty Kathy Dell, waking up with his hands between two pillows that aren't actually pillows, when all he wants is just to get home in time, for Thanksgiving with his family. And I cry every time I watch it. Why? Because I am Neil Page. Tired, impatient, annoyed, self-absorbed, sometimes frosty, but silently longing for friendship and love and laughter, to lighten up and let things go, which is really what it means to finally be at home in this world. Life is a road trip, and the real objective is not arriving, but becoming. Becoming more human, more real, more alive and whole. The Bible is full of road trip stories. Individuals, friends, groups, even entire nations, they're always on the move in Scripture, going from one place to another, from old ways to new ways, from the past to the future, from former things to new things. Abraham and Sarah trekking to Canaan, Mary and Joseph journeying to Bethlehem, Paul and Timothy traveling to Macedonia, Cleopas and his unnamed friend walking to Emmaus, Ruth and Naomi journeying to Moab. But the most iconic road trip in the Bible is the one that the Hebrews took from Egypt to the Promised Land. It was such an eventful, formative experience that it took them 40 years to cover about 400 miles. And along the way, they learned a lot about themselves, about God, about hunger and thirst, vulnerability and trust, and especially how our stubborn, defiant human will is often our greatest obstacle to ever finding our true home. In today's passage, the wheels have fallen off the bus for the Hebrews. It's been one roadblock and setback after another. First, they escape Egypt with Pharaoh's army chasing after them, only to come up against a major obstacle, the Sea of Reeds. As Pharaoh's army approaches and death seems imminent, they complain to their leader Moses, who raises his hand over the waters until somehow the waters part just in time, and the people pass through, and the problem solved. They journey on until they find a pool of water, but the water is brackish, undrinkable, and they're dying of thirst. And so they complain to Moses again, and Moses talks with God, and God instructs Moses on how to MacGyver the situation, and once again, problem solved. And they journey on until they can't find food, and they're literally starving, so they complain to Moses again, and Moses talks with God, and manna and quail appear, and once again, problem solved. And they journey on from there until again they can't find water and they're dying of thirst, and so they complain to Moses. And now we're starting to see a pattern, right? We can see how all of this works every single time. Complain to Moses, blame Moses, harangue Moses, and problem solved. Only now, Moses has had enough. Moses is losing his mind. Moses can't go on like this any longer. The Bible doesn't say it, but this is that point in the road trip where every parent can identify with, where Moses turns around and tells the people, don't make me come back there. I'll pull this caravan over right now and give you something to really complain about. But you can't blame the Hebrews for complaining. Well, for one thing, they've been forced to eat manna 3 times a day. Manna is like a recycled cardboard pizza box disguised as bread. In Hebrew, the word manna literally means, what the heck is this? 3 servings a day of manna, 7 days a week. It gets pretty old. But worse than manna is thirst. Humans can survive days, even weeks, without food. But in the wilderness, exposed to the elements, humans can't survive more than a few days without water. Physical thirst, it's real. And their complaints are justified. A humanitarian crisis is unfolding right here. And this is where the story turns into a case study on human nature and the ways we so often blame shift instead of claiming our human agency to change our circumstances. The people complained to Moses, did you bring us out of Egypt just to let us and our families and our animals die of thirst? And notice that this isn't really a question, it's an indictment. It's your fault, Moses. If we die out here, you're to blame. The people complain to Moses, and it's brutal. So what does Moses do? Moses complains to God. Lord, what am I going to do with these people? Notice that he doesn't refer to them as my people or your people. He refers to them as these people. These people, it's just one letter off from those people. And those people is a label we often use to distance ourselves from people we don't like, to relinquish our relationship to them, our responsibility for them, to shift the blame onto them or someone else. It's the oldest trick in the book. When we can't seem to fix our problems, we tend to blame our problems on others. When we feel powerless in the face of our problems and can't see a way out of our situation, we blame shift, scapegoat, otherize just to exonerate ourselves. Until, God, what am I going to do with these people? Turns into, God, what are you going to do with those people? And then we wash our hands of our power and responsibility. This is a story about human nature. Out in the wilderness, dying of thirst, the people complained to Moses, so Moses complains to God until God is tested and put on trial, and we all conclude that it's no one's fault but God's alone. This is what led to the so-called death of God movement that emerged in the middle of the 20th century and actually persists in various forms even today. After World War I, the bloodiest, deadliest war in human history, and then after the Holocaust and Hiroshima and the annihilation of millions, the question of the day became, where was God? How could God allow such evil to occur? And out of the ashes, the answer for many was that God did not exist. That God, or at least the possibility of belief in God, had died in Auschwitz. It's the age-old question the Hebrews asked in the wilderness, is the Lord among us or not? But besides God is dead, there is another response to that question, where was God, or even where is God? It's a profoundly biblical response, and it's found right here in our Exodus story today. The Hebrews, they try to test God, questioning whether the Lord is with them or not. But God will not do for them what they must do for themselves. God will not absolve them of their power and agency to change their own situation. The cycle of blame shifting has to stop. The people must take responsibility for their lives. They must choose to act. And so God tells Moses to take his leaders to Horeb. And when you get there, God says, you'll find a rock. You'll strike the rock with your staff, and out of the rock, water will flow so that the people may drink and live. If it sounds odd, implausible, a bit too supernatural and irrational to believe that someone could actually strike a rock and squeeze enough water out of it to quench the thirst of thousands of people, give yourself permission here to lean less into literalism and more into metaphor. Because this story isn't just about a rock or the water that comes out of it. There is a deeper meaning here, a more enduring message about what happens when we stop blaming others and testing God for the things we do to ourselves, or the things that God does not do for us, until we finally listen and follow God's promptings to do for ourselves what we must do if we are ever to be the people we are capable of becoming. God commands Moses to strike the rock. And maybe the rock is simply a symbol of the power that awaits each of us in every moment of our lives. The power to act, the power to choose, the power to change ourselves and our circumstances and the course of our lives. Maybe in the story, the symbol of this power to act, to choose, appears in the form of a rock because, like every rock, the power cannot actually do anything on its own. Left untouched, unstruck, it is lifeless and useless and powerless. It needs us to act upon it. The Hebrews in the wilderness were asking, is the Lord with us or not? And so God tells Moses to strike the rock because there was a bigger question that God needs us to answer. Are you with me or not? After the ovens of Auschwitz and the horrors of Hiroshima, secularists, philosophers, even theologians proclaimed the death of God, but some theologians turned that question, is the Lord with us or not, back onto humanity. And they argued that God is very much alive and active in the world and is always asking us in every moment, are you with me or not? Process theologians offered a more hopeful and biblical vision of power, both God's power and ours. They said that there are always three powers at work in our lives and in the world. The first is the power of our past, which reminds us that what we've experienced before this present moment makes a profound difference in who we can become. We do not exist in a vacuum. We are the sum of our past experiences, even the past experiences of the universe. We can't escape our personal history or our shared common history. The past is never dead. It's not even over. It's a part of us. From personal losses and tragedies and victories to Auschwitz and Hiroshima and the transatlantic slave trade, the past is and remains a powerful force in and upon our lives. The past is never everything, but it is something. As hard as we might try, we can't escape our past choices, the experiences and traumas and mistakes, the things we've done, the things done to us. We take these past experiences into ourselves and into our present experience. For better or worse, these past experiences influenced who we've become and who we are in this present moment. But the power of the past does not determine our future. There's another power at work in our lives, which is the power of God in every present moment, who is constantly offering us new possibilities of becoming that are unlike any other possibilities we've ever seen before, like a rock in the wilderness. God offers these new possibilities to us based on the hope or intention, if you will, that God has in mind for us. That intention is for our wholeness, our well-being, what Jesus once called abundant life. And some people like to call this intention God's will, but will implies willfulness. And God never, ever imposes God's will on us. We are always free to reject God's intention. Instead, God's power is one of wooing us, beckoning us toward the divine intention, offering a way of dealing with our past and creating greater potential for our well-being today and tomorrow. God woos us toward that rock at Horeb in the wilderness and says, look, here's a possibility for you. There's a possibility for your well-being. You can strike the rock and live, if you choose. But not even the power of God is all determinative, because there always has been this third power at play in our lives. And that is the power of ourselves. The power God gives each of us to determine our present and influence our future. It's the power we each possess as humans to decide for ourselves what we will do in this moment, how we will live, who we will become, moment by moment. This power of ourselves, it joins the actual past that we received from the world and our experiences with the possibilities for the future that we received from God. It's the power to strike the rock. And it's our power to choose and act to become well and whole and alive. Is the Lord with us or not, they asked. Now, we're still asking that question today, because life, it really is a road trip. And so often we get stuck. We get detoured. We get lost. And we want to believe that it has to be anyone's fault but our own, especially those people or our leaders. And that's when God turns the question back on each of us, reminding us of our power to act and choose and determine our future, to work for the well-being not just of ourselves, but for the whole tribe, the whole world. Are you with me or not? Years ago, I had one of those road trip experiences. I was presented in my life with a possibility, a new career adventure, if you will, that would require me to act decisively. I had to choose. And how things would turn out, I didn't know. I only knew that it was my choice. And no one else could be blamed if it didn't turn out well. I was struggling with making this decision, so I talked to a friend about it, a remarkable friend. He was a homeless man who came to my office about once a month to pray for me. He had been a preacher back in the day, and now he lived in a shelter. It was one of the coolest and most unlikely friendships I've ever had in my life. I confessed to him my fear of making the wrong decision, and he said there are no wrong decisions, and that he was living proof that even what might seem like a wrong turn can still lead to the right place. And he said, just look at me. smiling. And I said, Thomas, that may be true, but still, you are actually sleeping in a homeless shelter, and I'd really prefer to get to the right place by a less inconvenient route. And he laughed. And he said, there's always more than one road to get you where you need to go. And you just have to choose a way. And only after you've chosen that way will God open up another way, and then you choose again, and it just goes on and on. So stop worrying, Pastor, and just choose, and just trust, and just keep your eyes open. And then he put his ancient, calloused hand on my shoulder, and he prayed for me. Our takeaways for today. Moment by moment, the power of the past, the power of God, and the power of ourselves are always working together. In every moment, God is asking us, are you with me or not? And only after we've struck the rock can water spring forth.